Today I'm sharing everything I've learned over years of buying homes around the world and building a global property portfolio. A lot of people think this must be incredibly difficult or that you'd go crazy owning multiple homes in different countries, but I'm breaking it down into 3 easy steps that you can use to build your own portfolio of homes around the world. So over the years, I've accumulated properties around the world, both for business interests in places where I have to go and spend time for business, and places that I enjoy for lifestyle reasons. I've also used these properties at times to help me get residence permits or even work towards citizenship so I can diversify myself all around the world. And that's come in really handy during the pandemic or whenever I just want to go and enjoy different parts of the world. My property portfolio consists of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Bogota, Colombia, and then a large concentration in Eastern Europe, in Belgrade, Serbia, in Montenegro, in Istanbul, Turkey, and in Tbilisi, Georgia, and currently working on one final edition in Western Europe. I'm going to break down the 3 main areas that I look at in terms of building and maintaining a property portfolio. It's number 1, purchasing, number 2, structuring the deal, and number 3, maintaining the property, which people think is really difficult, but really, if you plan it properly, it's a lot easier and really pretty inexpensive, but it's a lot easier than you might think. So here's an example of a question that we get asked a lot by people who like the idea of diversifying and having the lifestyle benefits of homes around the world. But this questioner says, I can't help but thinking that investing all around the place makes it extremely costly to do anything: tax returns, flights, meeting people, local knowledge, etc. How do you suggest people build a base of investments in a particular jurisdiction, or is there sufficient investment that meets any minimum economics of scale, or am I missing something? And so there's certainly ways if you want to be an investor. I have in the past thought, okay, if I'm going to actually own the properties, I'll pick 3 markets, for example, and I'll go and buy 3 apartments in each jurisdiction. And then you get some more money, you top it up, 3 more. You're just going to keep stacking it up to where you do have economies of scale. That's particularly helpful if you're getting rental income, for example, because yes, I can see why it would be frustrating to file a tax return for, $17 or some small amount of money. You don't necessarily want to get into doing that. What I've built is a lifestyle portfolio of properties, what one of my friends called a collection of pied-à-terres, largely around the world, where I go and spend time, because just from a lifestyle benefit, this is changing as I get older, as our business has grown a lot, but I like being able to go to Latin America and experience that. It is not my number 1 part of the world, but I also want to be in Asia, both for business reasons, and I just enjoy the lifestyle, the consumer conveniences. I like being in Europe, and so I'm expanding now a little bit even into Western Europe. I'm not renting these properties out. I don't Airbnb them when I'm not there. Well, I've talked about that in a separate video that you can go and watch, Why Not Rent My Properties. One of the reasons is just the juice isn't worth the squeeze in terms of you're going to have a lot of hassles and people are going to break things. Also, that you can make $7,000 in income and you've got to deal with taxes on that. There may be regulations. So for me, we're going to talk about purchasing, structuring, and maintaining properties that you live in. This could be, I want a plan B when something bad happens in my country. And if it comes with a residence permit that gives me diversification, great. It could be, I want a summer home. I want a winter home. I want a place to live half the year. I want a business hub. If I'm going to go and start hiring in a certain country, I want to go and visit my people. My property portfolio is born in part from, I got sick and tired of staying in hotels. The 5-star hotel thing gets tiring very quickly. The service isn't up to par. It's much easier just to kind of serve yourself in your own property and have everything that you want waiting for you. And you can travel with just a carry-on or even a laptop bag between homes. So let's talk first about the purchasing process, and let's talk about the challenges of the purchasing process. The first challenge is knowing where to buy. And so if you're just watching me and you're sitting in your own country and you're hearing me say, buy property in another country for diversification, you may not know where you want to buy. And so some exploration of different places is a good idea. As I've explored more and more of the world, I've started building my property portfolio. And I think that most of the cities I want to spend time in, I'm covered in. So you're usually going to buy where you like. I traveled to every single country in Southeast Asia a long time ago. I've invested in numerous ones of them. I like visiting a number of them, but for me, Malaysia was the place. It's laid back enough. There's enough soft freedom. It happened that the tax policy was good. That wasn't my intention necessarily going in. They have a good immigration policy. And so I just liked living in Malaysia. My personal thought was, I'm going to live in the main city or the capital city pretty much everywhere I'm at. I like that city environment largely, especially if you're not living there all the time. It's just convenient to come in and get out. And so you want to figure out where it is that you like. However, you want to understand the conditions. I understand that while pretty much all my other properties have gone up in value in dollar terms. Kuala Lumpur has a supply issue. There's a lot of supply. They're still building more. And while the metrics have started to look really good in the last year in terms of property sales, you're probably not going to make huge profits from your property in Kuala Lumpur. But what you can get, especially if you want a larger home, is you can buy property at an incredibly low price per square foot or per square meter. The property that I own in Kuala Lumpur, it's much larger, but it actually came in at a lower price per square meter than my property in Tbilisi, Georgia, which for a long time up until the war was one of the ultra cheap property markets in the world. And so property in Malaysia, for example, is more of a lifestyle purchase. You can go to Thailand and maybe you'll get better appreciation, but you're going to pay a lot higher price per square foot. So you want to understand these metrics. To understand these metrics, you have to have some time on the ground, or you have to work with someone who has the time on the ground. So, I've spent almost 17 years now researching this whole international stuff. Obviously, what we offer at Nomad Capitalist is we help people get up to speed a lot faster than 17 years by offering them our services. And so you can pick up one property at a time, or if you've been traveling around the world for a long time, if you just know where you want to go, you can make a map of the places that you want to live. I wanted to cover each region. So again, that could be for business reasons. I was in Colombia. I had an engagement elsewhere in South America. It was easier to do that business engagement, right? I also might want to do some reconnaissance on new Latin American markets to go into, or expanding our hiring pods around Latin America. A lot easier to do from Bogota, where I live in Colombia, and you get an Avianca flight and you can go pretty much anywhere that you want to go. I also like when I go to Bogota, I'll go to the Peruvian restaurant. You can have a lot better Peruvian restaurants there than you do in Istanbul, right? Mexican food is the one food that I find really only gets nailed in Mexico, perhaps parts of the southern U.S., but just for lifestyle reasons, for business reasons, having that proximity, I wanted to have a trifecta that was evenly distributed. Even though I no longer live 4 months in each part of the world, I have those areas set up. And so if you have no interest in Latin America, I have friends that just say, I don't care. They're from, Ireland to Hong Kong, for example. That's their area. They just get rid of that one part. You can build whatever, regions you want to cover. If you want to be in Africa, there's people who are setting up bases in Africa. You can buy property there. One thing that I think you should think about that's kind of the challenge if you're new to this is residence and citizenship can influence you. I happen to like Mexico and I like Colombia in Latin America. Argentina is a bit further away from my taste. Chile I found boring. Uruguay, there's not a lot going on. For me, Mexico and Colombia, big enough countries, there's access, it's connected. What tipped the scales for me was Colombia was not only a bit better connected to Europe at the time for traveling, but Colombia had offered permanent residence if you buy a property. Now, one of the challenges, you have to get past your own mindset of if you're investing a certain amount for residence or citizenship, I wish I would have invested more in the property. I wasn't sure how much time I would spend there. And in general, I will not spend a ton of time in Colombia every year. But residence and citizenship can actually influence the property that you buy. If Mexico had said, hey, we'll give you permanent residence, that probably would have pushed me more the direction of Mexico. But if you look at where they're willing to give you residence, that's going to make your life easier. It's going to mean that if you decide to stay longer in your property, I've had a lot of Americans who've come to me and said, I bought a house in Europe somewhere. I didn't realize I can't just stay there as long as I want. I have 90 days in every 180-day period. If you get a residence permit, that solves it. And so you don't have to get the residence permit from buying the property, but in some countries, that's the easiest way to do it. And so international airports might also influence you. Those are the things you need to think about, right? The other challenge is finding properties at local prices. That's just a matter of being on the ground. We've spent years building a real estate network of trusted contacts all around the world. And so when you work with us, you get access to that network. I constantly find people who come to me and say, hey, I found a deal on my own, and it's like 20% overpriced. In some places like Turkey, you might pay double what you should if you know the locals deals, especially if you're trying to buy in brand new construction, especially if you're trying to buy in fancy neighborhoods, which I'm all for. You may very much overpay because you're going to buy the sizzle, not the steak. And so you want to have those deals. We help our clients do that. But that's just a matter of putting the time in on the ground. So either you're going to live there and rent for a while, or you're going to know somebody. Now, closing the deal is also a challenge on the purchase side. Some places like the country of Georgia, you can transfer a title in one day if you pay the expedite fee, and that's like $40 all in. You transfer the title. Other countries, like in Asia, for example, Malaysia, you need to get foreigner consent. It might take 3 to 4 months. You need to know that. I saw somebody once that took a year to close a deal in Malaysia, and that's just, your lawyer wasn't very attentive to things. You can do it in 3, 4, 5 months. So you want to understand what that process looks like, right? nothing wrong with saying it takes 3, 4, 5 months. Even in some European countries, it takes 2, 3 months to close a deal. But you want to know what that looks like going in so that when the year happens, you're not thinking this is normal. And so closing the deal is an issue. What are the solutions to those things? Evaluate all the markets in a region. So if you want Asia, go and visit the cities that you think may be a contender. Don't necessarily follow the herd. If Bangkok is the popular place, look at other cities. Look at Kuala Lumpur. Look elsewhere. You have to know someone. So whether you're moving there or whether you're hiring someone with that expertise, and you do need a good attorney to handle properties in most of these places. Can you do it yourself in a country like Georgia where it's super easy? Sure, but it's also pretty cheap to hire someone to help you do it and therefore set the appropriate timeline. You're going to have to, in some of these countries, tell the attorney, tell the real estate agent, give me the timeline. What does the process look like? Spell it all out in advance. And even then, sometimes they're not going to tell you. So those are the challenges. Obviously, I've overcome a lot of those, and we help people do that. Let's talk about the structure, part 2. How do you hold the property? This, to me, is the easier part. People talk about asset protection. They want to own property in a trust. For me, for a lot of people, and this is not legal advice at all, but for a lot of people, just having an asset in a different jurisdiction already gives you some level of asset protection. You can structure properties in some countries in a local company. In some countries, again, like Georgia, very, very light requirements for ongoing disclosure for that. Although, if you need, to pay bills, you may need to set up a business bank account, which is probably harder to set up in a country than a personal bank account. Not every banker, not every professional is going to understand, why does this company, what else does the company do? It just owns a property. I don't understand that. So you can sometimes use local company structures, but other countries, let's say some of them in Latin America, there's going to be annual filing requirements, taxes to pay, things to do. You're going to have to retain an attorney that you wouldn't have to do if you own the property in your own name. Plenty of countries let you own property in foreign trusts, foreign corporations. Not all of them do. And even those that do, like if you think you're going to own a property and if you have any issues in that country, the local judge, for example, is not going to take your property because it's in a foreign holding structure. That's not necessarily going to help you. I've seen in the United States, for example, someone, owned their house in a foreign trust. The judge just said, we're taking your house. Estate tax issues are the biggest reason why it may be an issue. If you own a property in, again, some Latin American countries in your own name, it might take years to adjudicate that from an estate perspective, whereas if you just have, let's say, a local corporation that corporation's owned by a foreign trust, that makes the estate tax process easier. So you want to understand what's happening in the estate tax process in every jurisdiction where you own property. And if you want to put that centrally under some kind of offshore trust, you could theoretically have some properties owned directly by the offshore trust, some companies owned in local companies. You could have a foreign holding company like in the BVI. This is tax neutral. It holds some of them, but every jurisdiction is going to be different. It's up to you to, how obsessive are you that, they're under, what's the org chart look like? Asset protection, again, do you have more asset protection in a structure? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on your issues. And so not every country even wants trusts. So Ireland, for example, really discourages trusts for tax reasons, whereas a place like Singapore, banks and everybody don't really understand, why do you have a trust? We don't have taxes here and stuff like this. And then from the structural perspective, what do I get from owning the property? Residence, citizenship. You can often own property in countries in a local structure and still qualify for that residence or citizenship. Not always. But it is a lot more paperwork. And then keep in mind that if you have a structure, there may be paperwork to file in your own companies. If you're in the United States, foreign companies require returns every year. Foreign trusts require returns every year. So even that Georgian company, if that has no requirements in Georgia, may have requirements in the United States, and it may make getting residence or citizenship more difficult. It's just more work. How much effort do you want to put in, and what are your ultimate goals? When someone comes to Nomad Capitalist, we're going to help them figure out what's the goal in order. Okay, my goal is residence. Okay, is that above residence? Is that above asset protection? How do we order these things, and how much pain are you willing to take in terms of structuring for estate, asset protection, whatever the issues are? Now the issues are maintenance. You want to understand all costs going in, utilities, operations, etc. Obviously, if you're buying in a condo building, what does that cost? I think apartments, condominiums are easier to manage. You lock it up and you go. What I'm looking for is properties, if I'm getting an apartment, where it's a little bit older. It's not the flashiest place. The flashiest places we can be a little crude, attract some douchebags. When you have douchebags living in your condo, what kind of security guards do you think you have? Who do you think wants to work there? I want to live in a place where maybe, if you're in your 20s or 30s or early 40s, maybe you're younger than most of the people. Maybe a lot of the people have been living there for 5, 10, 20 years. You want a place where people own their home. I don't want to be in a place where there's a lot of Airbnbs or a lot of expat rentals. When I'm going to live in a home, I want to live in a place where maybe the building's a little bit older, to where the people looking for the flashiest place are kind of overlooking where I live. I mean, I have one building, the security guards, one of them has worked there for like 28 years. The building is my age. They keep it in great shape. If you look at it from the outside, it's not flashy, but once you get inside, it is nice. And so I'd rather live with people who are a little bit older money than people who are the bros. Squatter issues is a concern that some people have. I think Spain is probably one of the worst countries for this. I've never had any issues. Certainly you can look at countries where they don't tolerate that kind of stuff. I mean, so you can kind of adapt. If you're going to go to a place like Spain, you understand their politics going in. You don't have to worry about that. So that's what I'm looking for. I don't think the squatter issue is that big of a deal. If I owned a bunch of homes that I was just locking up, maybe I would look for a gated community or something where I had that same kind of security apparatus, especially if I wasn't there as much. If I'm going to live in a place for 8 months, I'm not as worried about, leaving it open for a month or so. But if I'm going to be gone for 6, 9, 12 months at a time, then I'm looking at a condo or I want to be in some kind of gated community. Taxes and bills, some countries are easy. So in Georgia, utilities are on auto pay. I don't even think about it. In a country like Malaysia, you can pay with a credit card, you can pay in advance, pretty easy. Think about it once a year. In a country like Serbia, you got to go to the post office, or you've got to use some banking app that doesn't work, and your account numbers are always changing, and you can't put it on auto pay, so that's a bigger process. I have someone that works with me, just goes there once a year, and just pays it in advance and does everything. In a country like Montenegro, Turkey, or Colombia, I have trusted contacts that go in. You're looking for places that are diverse. And so in Montenegro, for example, you go in and it's like some of the utilities, it's like a smoke-filled room where some guys are sitting around like playing cards and they're like, all right, put the money on the desk kind of thing. Some of these places are very informal. Certain people who've lived in Central America said they put my utility bill under a rock. They just come over once a month, they put it under the rock in some of the more rural areas. So I pay a fee to people. In one case, it was the company that renovated the apartment, great guy in Colombia. In one case, it's Anka, the real estate maestro in Montenegro. And in one case, it is the agent who sold me the property and kind of runs an ad hoc property management business. Understand that in a country like the U.S., rules are very defined. I'm a property manager. I do that. Here's my rules. It's very legalistic. In other countries, people just kind of, all right, they'll help you out. So in one case, I pay $500 a year. They handle my bills. In the other case, they help me buy the property. That's just kind of part of the package, and we have a friendly relationship. And so they handle it for me once a year. I'll come in and say, hey, here's the cash once a year. Or I'll give it to someone on my team. Hey, here's the cash once a year. So you can set these things up how you want. You may consider, how easy it is to pay your bills. So again, Georgia, you put it on autopilot. Not every country allows you to do that. But quite frankly, it's just not a big deal to just go through. I keep a spreadsheet with every bill, every account number. It's all there. Share that with an assistant. And once a year, you just go and pay it in advance. I mean, maintaining even a large property in Malaysia cost me, with everything, $7,000 a year, something in that range. So it's not a big thing just to say, hey, here's the money in advance. You guys handle it. And so the bottom line is, owning property is pretty much the same everywhere. Same kind of expenses, although generally much lower in some of the places that we're talking about. But the processes could be different. Certain things could take longer. Certain things can be more informal. Certain things, you just have to understand the process. There's no substitute for real-world knowledge. I think that's what we try and bring at Nomad Capitalist. But if you're concerned about these issues, I think that I've managed it pretty well. I don't get stressed out about properties. I don't even think about properties generally. And I wouldn't worry too much about having a collection of homes as long as you have a friendly face in each place who can handle stuff for you.